Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm really excited to show you what I'm doing. Before I did all of this YouTube stuff, I enjoyed making metal art sculptures. I made this steering wheel and this tarantula and this giraffe and this dragon. And I really enjoyed the art side of metalwork, so I wanted to continue doing that now that I'm doing this. And with the shop at a spot where I can actually work in here, today's the day. So I am making, as you saw in the title, my Star Wars X-wing, and I'm pretty excited to see how this one turns out. Don't really have a plan for it. Like most of my sculptures, I just start with the basic idea and see where it takes me. So let's get into it. Starting out, I took all the bolts that I'll be using for the wing section of this. Some of them I cut all the threads and the head off of the bolts. The others I just cut the heads off. I needed 8 of them for each section, so I just got that all cut up. And then I did the rough shaping of the, I'm not actually sure what it's called, but the pieces that go on the end of the wings. I did my rough shaping of those. With all those in a decent spot, I moved on to laying out the actual shape that I want each individual wing to be. With the layout on, I threw it in the vise and grabbed my cut-off wheel so I could cut out all of the wings. With those cut out, I moved on to the large bolt that I'll actually be using for the body of the ship. I wanted the end to be pretty much square, so measured it out and I cut off the sides so I could have a nice square edge. With the rough cut done, I threw my grinder in vise because it seemed easier. So I grabbed the pieces for all my wings and actually did the final shaping to get them to where I wanted them. With all my wing pieces prepped and ready to go, it was time to start putting it all together. I threw a small tack on one side of the wing, eyeballed it, tried to make sure that it looked pretty straight, and when I was happy with it, I tacked in the other side and moved on to the next one. I had to do this for every one of them because I get a little OCD and I want things to be as straight as possible. I had to triple check everything that I was putting together because the top set and the bottom set of wings need to be opposite of each other, so the top bolt is on top and bottom. So I had to look at it a few times to make sure I wasn't putting them on upside down. This was the only one that I put on where the tack actually lifted up the piece. So I just grabbed my hammer, pounded it back down so it was flat, tacked it in, and we were good to go. Of course, I forgot to bring my welding hood over to the table beforehand, so I had to run over, grab it, and I could actually weld all of these wings together. With the wings all welded up, I just wanted to clean up that outside edge because it looked a little rough and I wanted to blend it in. So I got the wings all smoothed out. With the wings prepped, it was time to actually start putting them on the main body of the ship. So I grabbed the big bolt, threw it in my vise, got down low and started eyeballing the wing on straight and tacked it in. I was happy with how the first one looked, so I moved on to putting on the second one. So I took it out of the vise, double checked that everything looked good, and for whatever reason I thought I'd be able to keep going with it sitting on the vise. I realized that was a bad idea, so clamped it in a little bit so I could put on the rest of the wings. With all the wings attached, I did a once over to make sure I was happy with how it looked, so it was time to move on to the last step. When I put the tacks on the top side, they obviously take up space, and I wanted the other small pieces that I was going to put at the end of the wings to sit as flush as possible. So I grabbed my die grinder and just trimmed down the tacks, and I found a BB or two, so had to get rid of those. No BBs. With that all set, ready to go, I grabbed the piece of bolt that I wanted to sit on the inside of the wing and started tacking the two on this side. Happy with how they look sitting on the top, I moved on to welding them in on both sides. You might be wondering, why am I not running full beads across these parts?
Well, since the material that I'm using for the wings is pretty thin, I didn't want to put all of that heat in there and have them curl up on me. So I went with just stacked tacks for my actual weld, since this is more of just a decorative piece. I don't have to worry about it being structurally sound. With that done, I rotated it so I could do the same process on the underside of the wing and lock everything in place. When I got to the bottom side, I had to do the same thing, so I grabbed my die grinder, cleaned up the tacks so those other pieces can sit flush. I put a little bit bigger tacks on this side, so it took a little bit more effort to actually shape them down. I threw the piece on there for a test fit, and I wasn't happy with it, so gotta clean it out a little bit more. With it all welded, it was time to clean up all the BBs. I know I've talked about this a few times, but seriously, the one thing you can truly control in any welding situation is how much spatter you allow to remain on your piece. I don't know why it bothers me so much, but gotta get all the BBs off. With one final look over, everything seemed good, so I grabbed my wire wheel so I could polish up the entire thing. With everything polished up and looking pretty good, it was time to move on to actually making the base that I wanted this to sit on. Hey, look at that. It's that jig I made. Remember how I said it was gonna be used in the next video? Well, there it is. I wanted a gentle curve to the chain, so I set it up and welded it all on. But unfortunately, I missed welding two links. So when I took it apart, it still moved, which obviously won't work. So I clamped it back to the table and actually finished welding it. With it all welded up, I checked to see if it would sit the way I wanted, and everything looked good. So I threw it in the vise to polish it up and make sure it was clean and no BBs. Can't stress that enough. With that set, it was time to put my chain to the base plate. I'm using a 3/8 dropout, the piece of scrap that I got. Polished that up, got it all ready, and put the chain on. Was happy about the orientation, so I tacked it all in. Then I grabbed the ship and wanted to figure out how I wanted it to sit. So I went with a kind of a nosedive angle position. I don't know. I thought it looked pretty good, so that's what I went with. With everything tacked together, brought the wire wheel back out so I could polish it all up and finish up this project.
So that wraps up the build on my X-wing. Hope you enjoyed it because I had a lot of fun making this one, and I plan on doing a few more of these in the future, so stay tuned.
Ooh, check out that B